Let's see if we can't help some people out. Actually, we do have an email question that came in. Let's go ahead and put that up and see what Michael can do to help Kylie out. So Kylie says, if I decided to seek, that's not the email question I was looking at. Well, let's see what Kylie had to say. If I decided to seek legal help for my car wreck settlement, how long does it usually take? I need money now to pay these bills. Okay, so that wasn't the email question I was thinking, but Kylie, that is a great question that we often get asked on the personal injury side. Whenever we get a case settled or whenever people come in, how long does it take? And the lawyer answer, which is typically the one you're always going to get from a lawyer, is it depends. It depends on a lot of factors. But usually once a case is resolved, you've come to an agreement to settle for a certain amount of money. Usually the process takes anywhere from, it could be as short as a week or two, all the way up to a little bit longer, depending on what sort of liens you have to deal with. In my world, when I'm dealing with trying to get a case across the finish line and actually get money into my client's pocket, the one big thing that typically takes the longest is when we're having to deal with liens, usually liens that are asserted by the federal government, whether they be TRICARE liens, Medicare, Medicaid, things of that nature. Anytime there's a personal injury claim and medical expenses are paid, at least in whole or in part, by insurance, and that insurance comes through a federal plan like a TRICARE, like the VA, like Medicare. There is a federal law or a state law in the case of Medicaid that says you have to repay them for what they have paid, or at least a percentage of what they've paid out. Some of those liens are verified very quickly. Usually, I think Medicare usually takes a couple of weeks in order to get a response back, which is actually pretty quick for the federal government.
Absolutely.
Other times when you're dealing with TRICARE, the VA, those can take much, much longer. In fact, I've got a few cases right now where I have people that were service members that have TRICARE benefits, and we get a letter from TRICARE that says we will have a response to you in 150 to 180 days.
Right.
Which is very, very aggravating for the injured person. Kylie, it sounds to me like you're in a situation where you need money right now. You probably have some out-of-pocket medical expenses. Maybe she's missed some time from work.
Yeah.
And it's very frustrating when you get a letter from TRICARE saying we'll have a response to you in 150 to 180 days. That's 6 months.
Yeah. And one of the things you've got to think about from my perspective on that is, for you guys, you're looking at it in the timeline that may come in, because obviously the best case scenario that you have is a situation where if you've been injured, right, there's enough money to come back to cover some of those base level bills, and then you can actually receive some money for your pain and suffering. Right. But what's really unfortunate that you see sometimes is individuals where perhaps the amount of money that's coming in is not enough to chip away at that block for the medical bills or any other credit card bills or things like that may be stacking up. And so then in that case, you're looking at a scenario, Kylie, where perhaps the money that you're receiving from the settlement may not actually be enough to move the ball forward far enough to give you that debt relief without looking at a potential bankruptcy option. And in that case, the settlement would actually be considered property of the estate and would be used to address your debts in a larger picture, right? Right.
Yeah. So, I hate to tell people it depends, but it really does depend on a lot of things. But if you have a good handle on the amount of medical expenses, and I'm talking about situations where there is sufficient coverage. There's insurance coverage available to pay not just the medical expenses, but also cover lost wages, cover the pain and suffering. Oftentimes we can kind of roughly calculate what we think those liens are going to be. We can hold some of that money back in our trust account because we're required as officers of the court to protect those valid liens, whether they're asserted by contract or by federal or state law. And so oftentimes we can pull a little bit of money back from the settlement, be able to give our clients what we call a partial disbursement, to get them some money in their pocket, to give them some immediate relief, all the while doing what we're supposed to do and following the law and protecting those liens. But generally speaking, I would say usually it's as quick as a week or two. Sometimes it can take over a month or even longer to get that money. It just depends on a lot of factors. But that's something that if you do have an injury claim, your attorney should be able to counsel you on that, so you at least know what it is that you're dealing with.
Absolutely.